My name is Philip, I'm 38 years old, and I thought I knew my wife Rachel better than anyone else on this planet. We've been together for 15 years, married for 12, and for the past 5 years we've been running a joint real estate business in Denver, Colorado. It all started 3 months ago when we received a proposal from a major investment company regarding the development of a new residential complex on the outskirts of the city. The contract amount was $2 million, the biggest deal of our careers. Rachel was handling negotiations with the lead investor, Kevin Anderson, a 42-year-old man from California. At first, I was happy that she was so actively involved in the case. Rachel had always been ambitious, but this deal seemed to give her new energy. She started working late, going to meetings that, as she said, were critically important to the project's success. The first warning bell sounded a month ago when I accidentally saw her phone. She had left it on the kitchen table while taking a shower, and the screen lit up with a message. The name was K. Anderson, and the text began with the words, "I hope you haven't forgotten about our plans for tomorrow." I didn't read further. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, especially in marriage and business. But something about the tone of that message made me wary. For the next few weeks, I tried to ignore the little things. Rachel was indeed working a lot, but wasn't that normal for such an important deal? She often came home late, saying there had been long negotiations in Anderson's office or in restaurants where they discussed contract details. But then something happened that finally dispelled my doubts. 2 weeks ago, Rachel said she was going to a real estate conference in Las Vegas for 3 days. The deal with Anderson was approaching its final stage, and according to her, there would be important investors there that she needed to talk to. I had no reason not to believe her. She showed me the conference program, booked a hotel, even gave me the organizer's contacts. But something was bothering me. On the day of her departure, I decided to call the hotel to make sure everything was okay with her booking. The receptionist told me what changed everything. "Sorry, sir, but we don't have a reservation under the name Rachel Morrison. Maybe she's staying at another hotel?" I checked 3 more hotels from her list. The result was the same. Then I called the conference organizers. They confirmed that the conference was indeed taking place, but Rachel Morrison was not registered as a participant. I sat in my office, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do next. Part of me wanted to call Rachel and clarify everything right now. But another part suggested, if she's really deceiving me, then a phone confrontation won't do any good. She'll just come up with another lie. Then I made a decision that seemed logical at the time. I hired a private investigator, not to spy on my wife, but to find out the truth about our business. After all, if Rachel is hiding something about the deal with Anderson, it could affect our entire company. The results came 3 days after Rachel returned from her conference. The investigator sent me photos and a report that turned my life upside down. Rachel was indeed in Las Vegas. But not at a conference. She spent 3 days at the Bellagio Hotel with Kevin Anderson. In the photos, they walked through the casino hand in hand, kissed in a restaurant, entered the hotel room together. But that wasn't the end. The worst part was in the investigator's report about their business activity. It turned out that Anderson had already signed a preliminary agreement with another real estate company a month ago, our direct competitors, the firm Rocky Mountain Development. Our $2 million contract was just a fiction, a way to distract us from other projects while competitors occupied the market. And Rachel knew about this. The investigator found evidence of their correspondence where they discussed how long they could keep me in the dark. I couldn't sleep or eat properly for 3 days. Rachel acted as if nothing had happened. She talked about the successful conference, about new contacts, about how close we were to signing the contract with Anderson. I listened and nodded, while inside everything was burning with anger and pain. Not just because she betrayed me, but also because she destroyed our business, our financial stability, our reputation in the industry. Then I made a decision that might have seemed cruel, but seemed to me the only right one. I began preparing for revenge. Not emotional, not impulsive, but cold and calculated. First, I secretly began transferring our joint assets from Rachel. She had access to the main business account, but didn't know about the deposit account I had opened at the beginning of our marriage for a rainy day. I transferred everything I could there without breaking the law. Second, I gathered all the evidence of Rachel's betrayal and her conspiracy with Anderson. Photos, documents, correspondence, everything the investigator could get. Third, I learned that we had a big presentation of our project for potential investors scheduled for next week. Rachel organized this event as the final stage before signing the contract with Anderson. Representatives from the bank were supposed to come, our old clients, even several journalists from business publications. The perfect scene for my plan. The day of the presentation arrived. We rented a conference hall in one of Denver's best hotels. Rachel was in a great mood. She thought that in a few hours we would sign the biggest contract of our careers, and I suspected nothing about her betrayal. Kevin Anderson was one of the first to arrive. A tall, confident man in an expensive suit. He greeted me warmly, shook my hand, even praised our work. And then, when I turned away, I saw him and Rachel exchange glances, brief but eloquent. The presentation began at 2 o'clock. There were about 30 people in the hall, all important figures in Denver real estate. Rachel brilliantly conducted the first part, talking about our project, showing drawings and financial forecasts. Then Anderson took the floor. He talked about investment prospects, about trust between partners, about the importance of honesty in business. The irony of the situation was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And then it was my turn. I approached the microphone, looked at the hall, then at Rachel. She was smiling at me, obviously thinking that now I would talk about the technical details of the project. Dear colleagues, I began, today I have to tell you not only about our project, but also about something much more important. About how easy it is to lose trust in our industry. Rachel became alert. I saw her smile become less confident. 3 weeks ago I learned that our project with Mr. Anderson is a fiction. That the $2 million contract exists only on paper, and the real deal has already been signed with our competitors. Silence fell in the hall. Everyone looked either at me or at Anderson. Rachel turned pale. But what struck me most was not this, I continued. What struck me most was that my own wife and business partner participated in this deception. That she went on romantic trips with Mr. Anderson instead of business conferences. I took out the photos and placed them on the table in front of the microphone. Here's the proof. Rachel Morrison and Kevin Anderson at the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas. At the time when she told me she was working on our deal. Rachel abruptly stood up from her seat. Her face was red with shame and anger. Philip, what are you doing? Have you lost your mind? Maybe, I replied calmly. But I haven't lied a single word. If anyone present wants to review the documents or talk to the private investigator who conducted the investigation, I'll gladly provide contacts. Anderson also stood up and tried to say something, but I interrupted him. Mr. Anderson, you can leave. As can your partner in business. The presentation is over. The next few minutes were chaos. Rachel was yelling at me, Anderson was trying to justify himself to other investors. Journalists were taking notes. Several of our old clients came up to me and expressed support. Apparently, rumors about Anderson's unfair competition had been circulating for a long time, but no one had evidence. That same evening Rachel came home and demanded explanations. I calmly told her that our marriage ended the moment she first kissed Anderson. And our business ended when she decided to betray it for love games. You destroyed everything, she screamed. Our reputation, our relationships with clients, our future. You destroyed this, I replied. I just showed people the truth. The next morning I filed for divorce. Thanks to evidence of betrayal and financial conspiracy, Rachel couldn't claim half of our property. The court ruled that she violated the terms of our prenuptial agreement and caused damage to the joint business. A month later I learned that Anderson was also getting divorced. His wife, it turned out, hired the same private investigator after my public exposure. And Rocky Mountain Development terminated their contract with him due to the scandal. Rachel tried to open her own real estate agency, but her reputation in Denver was ruined. 3 months later she moved to Atlanta, away from the place of her shame. I stayed in Denver. Our old clients, impressed by my honesty, began bringing new ones. It turned out that in business, the reputation of a decent person is worth more than any contracts. Sometimes I think, what if I had just talked to Rachel? If I had given her a chance to explain? Maybe we could have saved the marriage? But then I remember those photos from Las Vegas. I remember how easily she lied to me every day. And I understand, a person capable of such betrayal will never change. Now I'm 40 years old. I live alone in our old house, run a business that's thriving more than ever before. I have proposals from several women clients, acquaintances, even from the secretary in the neighboring office. But I'm not ready for new relationships yet. Not because I still love Rachel. Those feelings died on the day of the presentation. But because trust is a very fragile thing. When it's destroyed, it takes a lot of time to learn to trust again. Maybe someday I'll meet a person with whom I can build a real, honest relationship. But there's no rush. I've learned to live alone and understand, it's better to be lonely than with a person who betrays you. And Rachel, she got what she deserved. Not because of my revenge but because of her own actions. I just made sure the truth came to light. But let me tell you more about what happened after that presentation because the story doesn't end there. The consequences of that day rippled through our lives in ways I never could have anticipated. The week following the presentation was a whirlwind. The local business journal published a full article about the incident, titled "Real Estate Power Couple Implodes in Public Scandal." They interviewed several attendees, all of whom confirmed the authenticity of the evidence I presented. The article painted Rachel and Anderson as calculating manipulators who had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to defraud both me and the legitimate investors. What I didn't expect was the outpouring of support from the Denver business community. Apparently, Anderson had a reputation for shady dealings that went back years, but no one had ever been able to prove anything concrete. My public exposure had given others the courage to come forward with their own stories. Marcus Webb, a developer from Boulder, called me 3 days after the presentation. "Philip," he said, "I can't thank you enough for what you did. Anderson screwed me over on a deal 2 years ago, but I never had the evidence to prove it. Your presentation has inspired 3 other victims to come forward. We're building a class action lawsuit." It turned out that Rachel and Anderson's scheme was part of a much larger pattern. They had been targeting successful real estate partnerships across Colorado, using Rachel as bait to seduce male partners while Anderson manipulated the business side. We weren't their first victims and we wouldn't have been their last. The investigator I hired, a sharp woman named Janet Collins, became something of a local celebrity. She started getting calls from suspicious spouses and business partners all over the state. "Your case broke everything wide open," she told me during our final meeting. "I've got more work than I can handle now." But the most unexpected consequence came from an unlikely source: Rachel's own family. Her younger sister, Amanda, had always been the responsible one in the family. She worked as a financial advisor in Phoenix and had always looked up to Rachel's business success. When the news of the scandal reached her, she drove straight to Denver. I'll never forget the conversation we had in my kitchen that Tuesday evening. Amanda sat across from me, her eyes red from crying, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. "Philip, I'm so sorry," she said for the 10th time. "I had no idea Rachel was capable of something like this. Growing up, she was always competitive, always had to win at everything, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined." What Amanda told me next added another layer to the story I thought I knew completely. "She called me last month," Amanda continued. "She was drunk, which was unusual for Rachel. She started talking about how she deserved more than what she had, how she was tired of being tied down by commitments and expectations. I thought she was just stressed about work. Now I realize she was trying to justify what she was doing." Amanda also revealed something that made my blood run cold. Rachel had asked her about liquidating some investment accounts their parents had set up for both sisters. Amanda had refused, thinking it was just temporary financial pressure from the business. Now we both realized Rachel was planning to disappear with Anderson, leaving me with nothing but debt and a destroyed reputation. "She was going to take everything and run," Amanda said, shaking her head. "If you hadn't found out when you did, you would have lost everything, the business, the house, your savings. Everything." This revelation made me realize that my public confrontation wasn't just about revenge or justice, it was about survival. Rachel and Anderson had been planning to destroy me completely. The legal proceedings that followed were complex and drawn out. Rachel tried to claim that I had publicly humiliated her without cause, but the evidence was overwhelming. The divorce settlement not only protected my assets but also required Rachel to pay damages for the business losses her deception had caused. Anderson faced even worse consequences. The class action lawsuit that Marcus Webb had mentioned grew to include 7 different victims across 3 states. The total damages sought exceeded $12 million. His investment company collapsed within 6 months, and he filed for bankruptcy shortly after. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was professional. Within a year of the scandal, my solo real estate business had grown beyond anything Rachel and I had achieved together. The reputation for integrity that I had gained from exposing the fraud brought in high-profile clients who specifically sought me out because they wanted to work with someone they could trust. I hired 2 new agents, both women who had left other firms because of ethical concerns about their previous employers. Sarah Martinez, a former prosecutor turned real estate agent, and Jennifer Kim, a young hotshot who had graduated top of her class from business school but refused to work for companies with questionable practices. "You know why we wanted to work for you?" Sarah told me during her first week. "Because you proved that doing the right thing isn't just morally correct, it's good business. Every client who walks through our door knows they're working with someone who won't lie to them or betray their trust. The business grew so rapidly that I had to move to a larger office space. The irony wasn't lost on me that the new location was just 3 blocks away from where Rocky Mountain Development used to be located. They had closed their Denver office after the Anderson scandal tainted their reputation by association. 1 year after the presentation, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from a journalist named Robert Chin from a national business magazine. He was writing a feature story about corporate whistleblowing and ethical business practices. "Mr. Morrison," he said, "your case has become something of a legend in business schools across the country. Harvard Business School is using it as a case study in their ethics program. Would you be willing to be interviewed for a national audience?" The interview, when it was published, brought even more attention. I started getting speaking requests from business conferences, university ethics programs, and professional associations. What had begun as a personal betrayal had somehow transformed into a platform for advocating business integrity. But success didn't erase the personal cost of what had happened. The trust issues I mentioned weren't just about romantic relationships, they extended to every aspect of my life. I found myself second-guessing business partners, questioning the motives of new clients, and analyzing every interaction for signs of deception. Dr. Patricia Williams, the therapist I started seeing 6 months after the divorce, helped me understand that this hypervigilance was a normal response to betrayal trauma. "Philip, what you experienced wasn't just adultery," she explained during one of our sessions. "It was a systematic, long-term campaign of deception that targeted every aspect of your identity, as a husband, as a business partner, as a professional. Your brain is now wired to look for threats because it learned that the person closest to you was the biggest threat of all." The therapy helped, but it was a slow process. Dr. Williams introduced me to other clients who had experienced similar betrayals, not necessarily adultery, but situations where someone they trusted completely had deceived them in fundamental ways. The support group meetings were initially awkward, but they became an important part of my healing process. One member of the group was a man named David whose business partner of 20 years had been embezzling from their construction company. Another was a woman named Lisa whose sister had been stealing her identity to take out credit cards and loans. We were all dealing with the same fundamental question. How do you learn to trust again when the person who hurt you most was someone you trusted completely? "The thing that helped me," David shared during one meeting, "was realizing that not everyone is capable of that level of deception. What Rachel did to you, what my partner did to me, these aren't normal behaviors. Most people, even when they're angry or frustrated or tempted, don't construct elaborate long-term schemes to destroy the people closest to them." This perspective was helpful, but it didn't make dating any easier. I went on a few dates in the second year after my divorce, but I found myself analyzing every inconsistency, every delayed text message, every change in routine. One woman, a kind pediatric nurse named Carol, actually called me out on it after our 4th date. "Philip, I understand you've been hurt," she said as we walked through Washington Park. "But I feel like I'm being interrogated rather than getting to know you. Every story I tell, you ask for details that feel like you're checking up on me. Every time I'm 5 minutes late, you act like I've committed a crime. This isn't a relationship, it's a deposition." She was right and I knew it. I apologized and tried to explain, but the damage was done. Carol was looking for a partner, not a project to fix. That conversation led to a breakthrough in therapy. Dr. Williams helped me understand that I was trying to control my environment to prevent another betrayal, but control is an illusion. "The goal isn't to find someone who's incapable of hurting you," she said. "The goal is to develop the skills to recognize healthy relationships and the resilience to survive if someone does hurt you." The 3rd year brought unexpected closure. Rachel called me on a Tuesday evening in March. I hadn't heard from her since the final divorce proceedings, and seeing her name on my phone screen brought back a flood of complicated emotions. "Philip," she said, and I could hear something different in her voice. The confidence, the manipulative charm that had defined her for as long as I'd known her, it was gone. "I know I have no right to call you. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. But I needed to tell you something." I almost hung up, but curiosity won. "I'm in therapy," she continued. "Real therapy, not just someone to complain to about how unfair my life has become. My therapist says I have something called narcissistic personality disorder. She says the way I treated you, the way I was able to lie and manipulate and justify everything to myself, it's not normal. It's not something that just happens when people fall out of love." Rachel went on to explain that her life in Atlanta had fallen apart completely. The real estate market there was different, more competitive, and her reputation from Denver had followed her. She tried to start over in 3 different cities, But the pattern was always the same: initial success followed by conflicts with partners and clients who eventually saw through her manipulative behavior. "Kevin left me," she said, and there was genuine pain in her voice. "Not for another woman, not for his ex-wife. He just left. He said I was toxic, that being with me was destroying what was left of his life. He was right." The conversation lasted almost an hour. Rachel apologized, but she also tried to explain her mindset during our marriage. She talked about feeling trapped by expectations, about resenting my success, about convincing herself that she deserved more than what we had built together. "I told myself that you were holding me back," she said, "that our marriage was limiting my potential. But the truth is, I was destroying the best thing I'd ever had because I couldn't stand seeing you be content with what we had together. I needed chaos, drama, the thrill of deception. I needed to feel like I was getting away with something." When she finally stopped talking, I sat in silence for a long time. Part of me felt vindicated. She was confirming everything I had suspected about her motivations. But another part felt something I hadn't expected: sadness. Not for our marriage, not for what we'd lost, but for the person she could have been if she'd gotten help years earlier. "Rachel," I said finally, "I appreciate the call. I really do. But I don't forgive you, and I don't want you back in my life. What you did wasn't just a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a sustained campaign to destroy me, and it almost worked. The fact that you're getting help now doesn't change what happened." "I know," she replied quietly. "I'm not calling because I want forgiveness or because I want you back. I'm calling because you deserve to know the truth about why it happened. And because you deserve to hear me admit that none of it was your fault." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, processing the conversation. Dr. Williams had prepared me for the possibility that Rachel might try to contact me someday, and we had discussed how I might handle it. The call had gone better than I'd expected. There was closure in hearing her acknowledge what she'd done, but it also reinforced my decision to move forward without her. The fourth year brought new challenges and unexpected opportunities. My business continued to grow, but I found myself becoming increasingly interested in the advocacy work that had grown out of my experience. I started consulting with other businesses about ethical practices and fraud prevention. I wrote articles for industry publications about recognizing and preventing partnership fraud. More importantly, I began to heal personally. The hypervigilance was still there, but it was manageable. I joined a hiking group, took a cooking class, and started playing tennis again for the first time since college. I was rebuilding my identity as someone other than the guy whose wife betrayed him. The breakthrough in my personal life came from an unexpected source. Jennifer Kim, one of the agents I'd hired, had been trying to set me up with her friend Maya for months. Maya was a divorce attorney who specialized in complex financial cases. Someone who understood betrayal and deception from a professional perspective but hadn't been personally devastated by it. "She knows your story," Jennifer told me one Friday afternoon as we were closing up the office. "She read the business magazine article, saw you speak at that conference last year. She's not looking for a project to fix or someone to feel sorry for. She just thinks you might be interesting to talk to." I agreed to meet Maya for coffee, with the understanding that it was just a conversation between two professionals who might have something in common. No pressure, no expectations. Maya turned out to be everything Jennifer had suggested: intelligent, direct, confident without being aggressive. She had shoulder-length black hair and wore glasses that gave her a professional but approachable appearance. We talked about our work, about the ethical challenges in our respective industries, about the books we were reading. What surprised me was how normal the conversation felt. I wasn't analyzing her words for inconsistencies or looking for red flags. We were just two adults having an interesting discussion over coffee. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said as we were finishing our second cups. "Jennifer told me about your presentation, about what you did to expose your ex-wife. Do you ever regret handling it that way? Doing it so publicly?" It was a question I'd been asked many times, but something about the way Maya phrased it made me think more carefully about my answer. "Sometimes I wonder if there was a more private way to handle it," I said. But then I remember that Rachel and Anderson were planning to disappear with everything I'd worked for. They weren't just betraying me personally, they were committing fraud that could have destroyed other people's lives too. The public exposure wasn't just revenge. It was the only way to stop them from doing it to someone else. Maya nodded thoughtfully. "In my practice, I see a lot of people who stay silent about betrayal because they're embarrassed or because they think it's their fault somehow. But economic abuse, fraud, systematic deception, these are crimes. You treated it like the crime it was." That perspective helped me see my actions in a new light. I hadn't just been the betrayed husband seeking revenge, I had been a victim of fraud who chose to fight back and protect others. We met for coffee again the following week, and then for dinner the week after that. Maya was unlike anyone I'd dated before, or maybe I was unlike the person I'd been before. The relationship developed slowly, built on honest conversations and mutual respect rather than the passionate intensity that had characterized my early relationship with Rachel. "You know what I like about you?" Maya told me after we'd been seeing each other for 3 months. "You're not trying to convince me that you're perfect or that you have everything figured out. You're honest about your damage, but you're not drowning in it. You're building something new rather than just hiding from what hurt you." 6 months later, Maya and I moved in together. It wasn't a decision we rushed into. Both of us were cautious people who had seen what happened when trust was misplaced. But the relationship felt solid in a way that surprised me. We complemented each other professionally and personally, and we both understood the importance of maintaining our individual identities within the partnership. The 5-year anniversary of the presentation came and went without fanfare. I was too busy to dwell on it. The business was thriving, my relationship with Maya was steady and fulfilling, and I was scheduled to speak at a national conference about business ethics the following month. But the anniversary did make me reflect on how much had changed. 5 years earlier, I had been a man whose world was collapsing around him. Now I was someone who had rebuilt not just his business and his personal life, but his entire sense of self. The speaking engagement at the conference was the largest audience I'd ever addressed, nearly 1,000 business professionals from across North America. The topic was ethical leadership in crisis, making the hard choices when everything is at stake. As I stood at the podium looking out at the audience, I thought about how different this felt from that presentation 5 years earlier. Then, I had been motivated by anger and the need for justice. Now, I was motivated by the desire to help others avoid the mistakes I'd made and to recognize the warning signs I'd missed. "Leadership isn't just about making good decisions when everything is going well," I told the audience. "It's about maintaining your integrity when maintaining your integrity costs you everything you thought you wanted." The response was overwhelming. Afterward, dozens of people approached me with their own stories: business partners who had stolen from them, spouses who had sabotaged their careers, family members who had betrayed their trust. Many of them thanked me for giving them the courage to confront their own situations. One conversation particularly stood out. A woman named Patricia approached me after most of the crowd had dispersed. She was probably in her 50s, well-dressed and professional, but there was something vulnerable in her expression. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "I've been in an abusive business partnership for 8 years. My partner has been systematically undermining me, stealing clients, and manipulating our financial records. I have evidence, but I've been afraid to act because I thought it would destroy my reputation in the industry." She paused, gathering her courage. "After hearing your story, I realize that my reputation is already being destroyed, just slowly and quietly instead of all at once. At least if I fight back, I have a chance to control the narrative." 6 months later, Patricia sent me a letter. She had confronted her partner with the evidence, dissolved their partnership, and started her own consulting firm. 3 of their largest clients had followed her, and she was happier than she'd been in years. "You were right," she wrote. "Sometimes the brave thing isn't avoiding conflict, it's making sure the conflict happens on your terms rather than on theirs." That letter, and dozens of others like it, confirmed something I'd started to understand about my experience with Rachel. What had happened to me wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was part of a larger pattern of betrayal and abuse that affects thousands of people in business and personal relationships. By speaking out about it, I was helping others recognize and respond to similar situations. Maya and I got engaged on a quiet Sunday morning in our kitchen. There was no dramatic proposal, no elaborate planning, just a conversation about our future that led to the mutual realization that we wanted to make our partnership official. "I love you," she said as she examined the simple but elegant ring I'd chosen. "But I also respect you. I respect what you've built, how you've handled adversity, the way you've chosen to use your experience to help others. I want to be part of that." The wedding was small, about 40 people including family and close friends. Amanda, Rachel's sister, attended and gave a toast that brought tears to my eyes. "5 years ago, my family was devastated by the choices my sister made," she said. "But out of that devastation came something beautiful, not just Philip's recovery and success, but his transformation into someone who helps others find their strength. Rachel destroyed a lot of things, but she couldn't destroy the good person Philip was meant to become." Dr. Williams, my therapist, was also at the wedding. During the reception, she pulled me aside for a brief conversation. "You know, when you first came to see me, I wasn't sure you'd ever be able to trust anyone completely again," she said. But watching you with Maya, seeing how you've built this relationship, I realized that you didn't just learn to trust again, you learned to trust better. You understand now that trust isn't blind faith, it's a choice you make based on evidence and experience. As Maya and I danced to our first song as a married couple, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The betrayal, the public confrontation, the painful process of rebuilding my life, all of it had led to this. But then Maya whispered something in my ear that brought me back to the present. You know what the best part of tonight is? Tomorrow we start writing a new story together. Not as people recovering from our past, but as people building our future. She was right. The story of Rachel's betrayal and my response to it would always be part of my history. But it wasn't the end of my story, it was just the end of one chapter. Now, 7 years after that presentation, I can honestly say that I'm grateful for everything that happened. Not because I enjoyed the pain or because I think betrayal is somehow beneficial, but because the experience forced me to discover strengths I didn't know I had and to build a life that's more authentic and fulfilling than anything I had before. Rachel gave me an unexpected gift when she betrayed me. She showed me exactly who I didn't want to be, and in doing so, she helped me become exactly who I was meant to be. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.